Hi, we're Quaint and Curious Volumes. My name is James. Today is Friday, October 31st, in whatever year this is. So I thought I would do a little end of the month wrap up and look forward to the next month. So October, as you probably know if you're watching this channel, is also called Victober here on BookTube. This is the month in which we read Victorian literature. And I read 5 Victorian works and a few poems here and there. I was going to do a Poetry Thursday yesterday. And I got out my old selected Thomas Hardy and read a couple of poems sort of at random to try and find something that I like. I don't know. Sometimes I like Thomas Hardy and sometimes I don't. I read 2 poems. I'm like, that's not very good. That's not very good. I don't know. Then I moved on. I had to do something else. So I didn't do a Poetry Thursday yesterday. I apologize. But anyway, let me tell you about what I actually did read this month. Well, I read poems, but I didn't do them on Poetry Thursday. So did they actually get read? Never mind. You can fill it in yourself. So I read The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. It's a play in, I believe, 3 acts. It's very funny. It sort of deals with names and inheritances and betrothals and all sorts of frothy things that ultimately are not important, but are fun to see unfold. And I read it while watching a staged production of it. So does that count as reading? I mean, I read it in the books, so I think it does. Anyway. And of course, I read Dracula by Bram Stoker. This was also the selection of Randy Ray's Lone Star Book Club, and I kind of read it all in a week or so rather than parceling it out in little sections as Randy is doing with his group. But it was my first time reading Dracula, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. There are times where this book kind of drags, where it's just sort of a lot of sitting around and talking about what they're planning to do, and you're like, I know how this ends. Let's just get to the Dracula bits, right? But it's still pretty good. Would this, who am I to criticize one of the English language's great classics? But I mean, if he dispensed with his found footage approach with the documents, the letters and diaries, and just like wrote this as a story, I think it would have been better. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, that was a first read of Dracula. Great fun. Also great fun of a different sort. Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is my first time reading a Thomas Hardy novel. I've talked about my admiration for his poetry before. I usually like it. I don't know. Anyway, this is a story of a tragedy that happens to a young woman in the countryside of Wessex, which I think is what happens in most Thomas Hardy novels. Bad things happen to people in Wessex, right? Tess is, part of a large rural family. Her father is not good for very much, but is informed by a parson who he encounters on the road, and who tells him, hey, you're descended from some of the local aristocracy, from a knight from back in the days of the conquest, the Norman conquest. And your name now is Darbyfield, but you are descended of the D'Urbervilles. Turns out that this parson is correct. This is the truth. And then the parson rides off into the sunset. We never hear from him again after like page 5 or something. But that little bit of information sets in motion a whole series of tragic events. involving another family called D'Urberville, but they are not D'Urbervilles at all. They are wealthy. They're a prominent local family, but they have just adopted this local name and grafted it onto themselves. They made their money in a different part of England entirely, and just came down and said, well, what's a local name that we can... Anyway, and so Tess, they're like, well, Tess, you should just marry one of those people. And, well, anyway, this edition, which is the Penguin Classics edition, and the new one with the black and white cut, whatever, is really well annotated. It has great notes in it. Sometimes the notes are too much because you'll have a note on, and it just tells you that this word is different in a different printing, and that is not worth flipping to the back of the book for. Sometimes it gives you good context. It also has a glossary, which is fantastic because there's a lot of like regional things from this part of England that you, even if you're well read in other Victorian literature, and you wouldn't pick up on. One of my favorite pieces of regional dialect is the term randy, which is it's an English phrase for being eager to having amorous intentions, let's say. But it all in the context of this book, someone says we should have a great rattling randy, which means to have a big noisome party. So there you go. A randy is a party. I was happy to share that bit with Randy Ray, the literate Texan. So anyway, I really enjoyed reading this book. Very well written. Some great descriptions of landscape. People are always going up and coming down from ridges and such. Just fantastic stuff. And the ending, is certainly tragic. It's set up from the very beginning, and it just all sort of plays out. There are many times when people could make different decisions, but they don't. They make the decisions they make, and they get what they get. And a lot of, when you're dealing with Victorians, as a 21st century person, there's a lot of things where you say, this wouldn't happen today. This would all make... all of this stuff would kind of vanish if people just say what they mean, or just get on with it, or you know what I mean. But just wonderfully written. And the Victorian era, thank God it's over. Let's see, what else was there? I read The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This was my first Anthony Trollope novel. So that's two Victorians that I've read for the first time this month. This, of course, is much lower stakes. Important stuff happens here, but it deals with a guy who has a job that pays him very well for doing really nothing. And what happens when someone challenges him on this? And this guy is a nice guy. He's a good guy. He's a clergyman and a musician, and he has the job of being he's the precentor of a cathedral, which in this context of the Church of England, a precentor is the person who is in charge of the music at the cathedral. Think I have that right. And with that job, he also has this position of being the warden of a charitable hospital, and the hospital is in the sense of basically a retirement home for 12 indigent elderly men. So they are given a place to live, and originally they were given 2 meals a day, but instead they are just given a sum of money per day, sort of a stipend per day. And the sum of money has not changed in several hundred years since this hospital was established, whereas the lands that furnish the salary for the warden have increased in value. So they're paying the same flat fee to each of the beadsmen, they're called. These are the 12 men who are supported at this hospital. Whereas the amount of money paid to the warden for overseeing this has increased dramatically. So he's getting, I think it is £800 a year for doing basically nothing, and this is we're led to believe a great deal of money. Now, someone comes onto the scene, a young doctor. Notice how doctors in Victorian novels are often addressed as Mr., whereas clergymen who have a doctoral degree are almost always called doctor. There's a case in here. So the Mr. Dang, I've forgotten his name. There is a young idealistic doctor who actually wants to marry the warden's daughter, but he also wants things put right. He wants more money to go to the beadsman than to the warden. So there's a bit of a Mr. Bold. Mr. Bold is the doctor. There you go. That wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth me looking for it. So yeah, it's funny. It's warm. It's it's light. It's over before you know it. But it's a good read. Am I going to read more Trollope? Probably. Should I go on to Barchester Towers? I've got a copy. I should. I like it. Will I do it now? No. Now I'm going to tell you about Silas Marner, which was a book I finished yesterday. Silas Marner by George Eliot. I think this is her shortest novel, and it is subtitled The Weaver of Raveloe. And as I've said before on this channel, one of the reasons I bought this copy is because it has these little shuttles on the cover. Those are used by weavers to make your weft or your fill yarn go in between, go back and forth, whatever. So, because my wife is a weaver and she has many of these shuttles around, and so Silas Marner is the titular character, is a linen weaver, originally in the north of England, in a town called, or in a community called Lantern Yard, and Lantern Yard is of sort of a, I think they're like a Calvinist sect. They kind of live amongst themselves, even though they're in a city. And Silas Marner gets basically betrayed by one of his friends as a young man and ostracized by the community. He leaves and travels to the Midlands, the middle part of England, to another town called Raveloe, where he settles down and reestablishes himself as a weaver. Now, being a weaver at the time of this book, which was, so this is set somewhat before it was written. So this is in the early part of the 19th century, before, a lot of industrialization would have made, someone weaving in a cottage on their own, that would have been replaced as a way of weaving things by industrialized weaving. But at the time, so weaving is, you can make a pretty good amount of money doing it, especially if you work 16 hours a day, which is what Silas Marner does. He's been betrayed by his friends. He has doubts about religion. So the only thing he cares about is weaving as much as he can so he can make as much money as he can. And he's storing up this gold in these bags that he's hidden under the floor of his cottage. And one day he comes home and it is gone. His gold is gone. He's been saving it up for years and it's all just vanished and he can't find it. We know what happened to it. He doesn't know. No one else knows, but we know what happened to it. And it's almost like a trick, like what happens. But so Silas Marner, after being robbed, he kind of things start to change for him. He starts to open up a bit, and people start to open up to him, whereas he was always considered kind of an oddity this solitary man who does nothing but weave all day and count his money, and he's nearsighted. Is there a metaphor in that? Right. He's very nearsighted, so people find him odd because he can't really see them, and he looks at them strangely when he passes them in the street. And but they'll, he's had this tragedy. He's had to open up, and then other things happen. Something very unusual happens. Due to things relating to the loss of his gold, no one in the book knows it at the time. He acquires, or a young girl appears in his house when he's not even paying attention. A 2-year-old girl just sort of wanders in on New Year's Eve, and this is shortly after he's lost all his money, right? So this girl comes in. He says later on, "Look, I had all this gold, and it just went away, and I have no idea why or where it went. And now I have this little girl, and I have no idea why or where she came from." And he says, "Well, I guess I have to take her. I guess this girl lives here now." No one says anything about it. Maybe the weird 40-year-old guy who only wants to count money and weave linen. Maybe we can find a better home for this girl. It never occurs to anyone, it seems. And then, this is very odd, the book just kind of jumps forward 16 years. So she's got a suitor who's a gardener. He's very happy. We kind of skip it all. It's like, Silas Marner is changed by having this little girl. Things go really well for 16 years. Trust me on it. I would have liked to see a little bit of that, because there's really none of it. Seriously, it's just like, oh, I have a ward now, and she's grown up. Hey, look, people who have kids tell you it goes fast, so I don't know. But anyway, this book, at times I was impatient with it, but it's so good. George Eliot is such a good writer, and so kind of insightful, like psychological, the way that she gets at the way people think about things. There are some sections where she's like trying to set a scene and just have a bunch of people talking about stuff, and there's maybe too much of that dialect writing that Victorians couldn't help themselves with. That got a little bit tedious to me at times, but really you get to know the important characters and the important, there's like only a couple of chapters that are sort of on their own where it's like, let's have a whole bunch of people talking about a whole bunch of stuff. But those are kind of self-contained, and then there are the important ones, and some of the dialect characters are pretty good, like I forget the woman who comes and talks about theology with Silas Marner. So yeah, it's a recommend. I say if you've got a copy of Silas Marner sitting around, it's a short read. It's really good, and there you go. That was my Victober. Did I have anything? I also I talked about this last week. I think I listened to an audiobook called Seduction Theory by Emily Henry, is that right? Emily Adrian. That it was really good. What was it really good? It was interesting. It's a contemporary novel. It's pretty new, and it's a campus novel. With an unreliable narrator. Is it like Pale Fire? Not really, but does the main character know that she's doing a Pale Fire kind of thing? She definitely does. She doesn't say it, but she does. Yeah, but if you like an unreliable narrator and unhappy academics, give it a try. It's short. But I just said I was going to try listening to it, and before I knew it, I was like a third of the way through it, so I kept going. Not too bad. Okay, so next month, starting tomorrow, is November. What am I going to read in November? Well, I've got a pile of books to show you for November. The only book that I have left from my sort of year-long classics TBR that I haven't read yet is Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. Why have I been putting this one off till the end? Because it's, Henry James's Portrait of a Lady. It's, so I don't know that if I'm going to get to this in November. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to at least start this in November so that I can finish it by the end of the year. A lot of my friends here on BookTube have read this and have said good things about it. So I suspect I will like it, but there's resistance. Resistance, is it melancholy resistance? Not really. But here's another one. Laszlo Krasnohorkai, the latest winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. This is one of the novels that people say is a good starting place. So I happen to have it. Well, I bought it, and that's how I get books, right? I didn't steal it from someone. And it didn't appear in my parlor like a little girl appeared in Silas Mars. Look, so I'm going to give this a try. It's he doesn't like paragraphs, which I hate, but I'm going to have an open mind, and I'm going to read it. It does have sentences. It has periods and commas and such. So there's that. What does it say it's about? The Melancholy of Resistance. Laszlo Krasnohorkai's magisterial, surreal novel depicts a chain of mysterious events in a small Hungarian town. A circus, promising to display the stuffed body of the largest whale in the world, arrives in the dead of winter, prompting bizarre rumors. Well, that sounds good. Word spreads that the circus folk have a sinister purpose in mind, and the frightened citizens cling to any manifestation of order they can find. Music, cosmology, fascism. Okay. The novel's characters are unforgettable. Okay, so sounds pretty good. So I'll give that a try. Here's a book I've had for a while, and I pulled it out because I'm working on some kind of a side project. And this is Banjo Roots and Branches. It's a collection of essays edited by Robert Winans. They're essays about the early history of the banjo in America and the Caribbean. And also, as you can see, the roots and branches part, the roots meaning referring to the earlier antecedents of the banjo, that you would find in West Africa. So the banjo, our best historians of this now say, was a recreation by the slaves in the New World of very similar instruments that existed then and still exist in West Africa. So you see, these are some of the antecedent instruments as they still exist and are played today. So there's been a lot of work on this in the last 20 years. This book is almost 10 years old now. I've read some of the essays in it, and I don't know that I'm going to read it straight through, but I'm going to read some of the essays in here. And related, this is a new book that has come out from the University of Mississippi Press, or the University Press of Mississippi, which is Fiddling Is My Joy by Jacqueline Cogdill JJ. This author was a professor at UCLA, and she has another book about African fiddling in West Africa, which I read years ago. And this sort of traces a similar thing to these banjo researchers who trace African banjo type music into the United States. So she wrote about sort of violin-like bowed instruments in Africa, and here she has a book about African Americans and their history of playing violins and fiddles in the New World. So this is a great big book with some chapters of history, and then kind of more regional essays. So chapters named after different states in the United States, so Kentucky and Louisiana. And we'll talk basically about the different particular musicians, the African-American fiddle players from those states. So it has, I think the bulk of this book seems to be portraits or short biographies of different African-American fiddle players. So here's one about Arnold Schultz, who was from Kentucky and was a neighbor of the young Bill Monroe, who was famous for popularizing the style of music we call bluegrass. And Arnold Schultz was someone that Bill Monroe always said he learned a lot of music from when he was a young man. And I don't believe he was ever recorded. So this is a picture of Arnold Schultz and Pendleton Vandiver. Pendleton Vandiver was Bill Monroe's uncle. So that's there's a white man and his black friend Arnold Schultz playing the violin, and two unknown musicians with them. So I imagine there will be quite a bit about early interracial recording sessions and the varieties of repertoire. And I don't know. I've read a lot of books like this, none quite so big, and I'm looking forward to digging into this also for this little project I have going. Let's see. This evening is Halloween here in the United States. Well, I guess everywhere it's Halloween. My particular neighborhood of Winston-Salem is one of the main neighborhoods for trick or treating. We get a lot of kids coming through. My neighborhood was built in the 1920s and 30s, so we have sidewalks, and the houses are relatively close together. So those things combined with it, and it's kind of a middle class place, so people have some money to spend on decorations and candy to give away. So we don't do a lot of decorating, but I like to give out some candy to the little kids. So I'm going to do that in a bit here. And if you're in the United States, or even if you're not, you may have seen the news that the government shutdown is going to affect the SNAP program, or the what used to be called the food stamp program in the United States. This is a transfer of cash benefits to be used for buying food to people who have straitened circumstances. The amount varies depending on the state. States that set different rules, but if you have some money to spare at this time of year, consider giving some to your local food bank. You can look them up on the internet. We have an organization called Second Harvest Food Bank in my part of North Carolina. I'm sure there's one where you live that you can look up if you don't know who they are already. But I give $100. I recommend you give, if you can, whatever you can. I'll probably give some more later after I pay my bills. They'll tell you, there's lazy people who are living on this money. No one's living on this money. They're buying food with it. I got SNAP benefits for a little while, and it helped me get through some tight circumstances. And I'll tell you, you don't get enough to live on, but it helps. It helps take the sting out of some stuff, and helps people get from one place to another. Most people who are on this program are on for a year or less. So, and a lot of those people are children. A lot of them are old people. It's not a lot of lazy people. So anyway, that's what I've got for you. What are you reading? I hope you're reading something good. I hope you'll join Randy, Ray, and I on Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central for Cinephile Sundays. We're doing The Manchurian Candidate. We'll be, me and Randy, a couple of book guys, are going to pretend to be movie guys for an hour or so. It's been a lot of fun so far, so I hope you'll join us for that. And thanks for watching. I've been going on for way too long. All right, bye.